People quickly recall the accomplishments of the German Panzer aces when the terms tank ace and World War II are used together. Their records are remarkable, with examples like Knispel leading the pack collecting 168 kills, with Michael Wittmann and Otto Carius also undoubtedly being recognized as some of the greats. But most people completely forget the aces of the Allied side, who tend to fade into the depths of history. So without further ado, here is the story of the most successful Allied tank ace of the Second World War, Dmitry Lavrinenko of the Soviet Union. In the Cossack settlement of Bestrashnaya, in the Soviet region of Kuban Oblast, Dmitry Fyodorovich Lavrinenko was born in 1914. The youthful Lavrinenko received his diploma from Vozneskaya's youth school in 1931. Prior to enlisting willingly in the Soviet Army in 1934, Lavrinenko held a position as a teacher at the Sladkoy Farm Primary School. Lavrinenko enrolled at the Ulyanovsk Tank Training School a year after joining the army. He graduated as a junior lieutenant after completing his training in 1938, and in 1939 he took part in the Soviet assault in Poland. The following year, Lavrinenko took part in the action in Bessarabia. When the conflict with Germany broke out in 1941, Lavrinenko was a platoon commander in a T-34, equipped with a 76.2mm gun in the 15th Tank Division. His company and Lavrinenko were stationed in the western Ukrainian hamlet of Stanislav at the outset of the war. He was shortly reassigned to the 4th Tank Brigade, though Dmitry did not stand out from the crowd during his initial interactions with the Germans. Lavrinenko distinguished himself for the first time in his career at the Fight of Msensk, when tanks led by Lieutenant Colonel Kadykova successfully opposed German attackers. Lieutenant Lavrinenko and his 4 T-34s ambushed a convoy of German tanks from the 4th Division, attacking a retreating motorized infantry battalion and mortar section on the 6th of October in a Soviet village near Msensk. The German tanks had encircled the infantry unit, causing heavy casualties among the frontoviki. Lavrinenko and his tanks opened fire on the panzers, repositioning their tanks after each volley. This gave the German tankers the idea that they were up against a larger group of Soviet tanks than they were truly facing. Lavrinenko and his crew scored their first 4 tank kills in this encounter. His tank unit also scored numerous hits on the panzers. Senior Sergeant Antonov and his crew annihilated 7 German tanks. Sergeant Kapitov disabled 1 tank, and Junior Lieutenant Polyansky wrecked 3 tanks and 4 motorbikes. The rifle battalion was saved and was able to escape their foxholes and retreat safely. Throughout the brief engagement, the platoon had suffered no tank losses. 3 days later, on October 9, 1941, Lavrinenko and his platoon, together with a platoon of BT-7s, utilized an identical ambush method to stop a German panzer advance. A number of panzers were destroyed, and the rest retreated. Lieutenant Lavrinenko successfully set fire to one of the panzers. He had already destroyed 7 tanks by October 11, 1941. At that time, Kadykova's 4th Tank Brigade had been redesignated as the 1st Guard. Colonel Kadykova's force was deployed to the Volokholamsk region near Moscow, following the action at Msensk against Guderian's 2nd Panzer Group. On October 19, 1941, the Red Army Tank Force arrived at Chizman Station, located 150 kilometers from Moscow. The following day, it was discovered that Lavrinenko's T-34 and crew themselves were missing. Kadykova had left Lavrinenko and his men outside the 50th Army headquarters in the interest of keeping it protected. He intended to drive back towards his own unit after being released, but first he had to stop in Serpukhov. When Lavrinenko returned, the director of the unit's political section became enraged and demanded an explanation. The leader of the village of Serpukhov had given Lavrinenko orders to assist him in defending the town. This was accomplished with enthusiasm by Lieutenant Lavrinenko. In Serpukhov, he learned from the village commander, Fursov, that a German column the size of a battalion was starting to close on the frontoviki defenses. The German forces were making their way from Maloyaroslavets to Serpukhov on the roadway. Fursov was defending with a small army while waiting for reinforcements to arrive. To stop the Nazi column, Dmitry had only 1 tank. He used the limited time he had to prepare an ambush. A short time later, the first German tank emerged on the roadway. Motorcycles were leading the way, followed by several trucks and anti-tank guns. The Germans, unaware of the presence of Lavrinenko's T-34, confidently rolled on. One of Lavrinenko's main tactics was to get up close and personal and use his armor advantage. He waited until the column was only a mere 150 meters away to shoot it at point-blank range. 2 anti-tank guns were destroyed in quick succession. The German crew was preparing a third gun for firing. Conscious of the danger, the Soviet tank commander directed his driver to break cover and advance onto the road. The gun and several other vehicles were crushed under the weight of the tank as it steamrolled over them like nothing was ever there. Following the ambush, Soviet forces approached and wiped out the rest of the German column. The Red Army at Serpukhov was capable of seizing 13 machine guns, 6 mortars, 10 motorcycles, and an anti-tank gun with an ample amount of ammo thanks to Lavrinenko's actions. A staff truck was also captured containing vital German army records which were promptly transported to Moscow. On November 17, 1941, a major tank-on-tank engagement took place in the town of Litsevo. Senior Lieutenant Lavrinenko led 3 T-34s and 3 BT-7s against 18 German panzers. The Germans rapidly lost 7 panzers, but they did manage to set fire to 2 of the 3 BT-7s. During the engagement, 2 T-34s were damaged. Soviet forces took the village under the cover of the senior lieutenant's surviving tanks. Meanwhile, the German forces secured the village of Shishkino as Lavrinenko and his tanks were fighting for Litsevo. The German soldiers successfully attacked the right flank of General Panfilov's 316th Rifle Division defending Moscow the next day. Lavrinenko pushed his T-34s to the roadway leading towards Shishkino after receiving terrible news from the north. There, he set up for yet another ambush. His white-painted T-34 blended seamlessly into the snow-covered field, giving them an early advantage over the Germans. Within 30 minutes, 18 panzers were spotted approaching the main road. Lavrinenko, who was hidden in cover, waited until he could see the broadside of the German armored column before opening fire. He began by striking the leading tanks. After that, the column came to an abrupt halt. Lavrinenko and his men then directed their fire on the rear of the column before moving to the center. Lavrinenko and his crew managed to halt the German advance by eliminating 6 German panzers. Just 2 days later, on November 19, 1941, the successful Soviet tank ace was in the town of Gusenevo, with his tank just outside the divisional headquarters. 8 German tanks were reported approaching down the neighboring highway. Lavrinenko leapt into his T-34 and charged towards the German panzers. He instructed the tank to come to a halt in order to start firing. At close range, the first shell destroyed one of the panzers. Fedotov, the loader, claimed that he didn't have time to load a new shell before their next shot rang out. 7 bullets were fired, knocking out 7 panzers. However, just as they were ready to send the last round into the final surviving panzer, the gun trigger mechanism jammed, allowing the 8th Panzer to flee unharmed. As another group of 10 German tanks reached their position, there was no time to lose. Lavrinenko and his men were sitting ducks with the trigger damaged. A shell suddenly erupted through the side of his tank, killing the driver instantly. The remainder of the crew, including Lavrinenko, escaped and survived the flames relatively unharmed. On the 18th of December, on the outskirts of Volokholamsk, Lavrinenko destroyed the last of his astounding 52 tanks. Soviet tanks surprised the Germans when they punched through the Chesmeny Ridge. In that moment, Lavrinenko made the decision to launch an attack on the German-occupied town of Pokrovskoye. The Germans, on the other hand, assembled a force of 10 panzers and marched towards Goryuni in the hopes of cutting off Lavrinenko and his tank detachment. The 27-year-old tank ace observed the German panzers and realized what was happening immediately. He instantly ordered his unit to retreat and instead attack Goryuni. Katakova's mobile group arrived at the same time. Instead of preparing a trap, the German tanks had unintentionally pushed into a Soviet counterattack. The German armor was dealt with after a brief firefight, and Lavrinenko had earned his 52nd and final tank kill. He also helped push back the German army and destroyed numerous other pieces of machinery. After failing to conquer Goryuni, the Germans began to use mortars to attack their original target. Colonel Chernyarov, commander of the 17th Tank Brigade, which happened to be a part of Lieutenant Colonel Katakova's detachment, summoned Lavrinenko to his headquarters to report on the victory. Dmitry was walking back to his tank after reporting his triumph to the colonel and obtaining orders to advance when he collapsed in the frigid snow. A piece of shrapnel from German mortar fire killed the Allied forces' best tank ace outside of his tank. After being killed, Senior Lieutenant Lavrinenko, 27 was buried near the highway between Pokrovsky and Goryuni. He is now entombed between Denkovo and Dolgorokovo stations. If you consider that Lavrinenko destroyed 52 German tanks in 28 battles over the period of 2.5 months, he might have easily matched the legendary German aces like Wittmann, Knispel, and Karius, who operated in significantly better armed and armored tanks. Although Lavrinenko was in command of a T-34-76, the tank was significantly inferior to the Tigers and Panthers utilized by the German aces. In addition to leading the crew, Lavrinenko had to serve as a gunner. And still, early war T-34s aren't recognized for their high visibility, making the feat even more impressive. Dmitry Fyodorovich Lavrinenko was posthumously honored with the Order of Lenin for his exceptional performance in the Red Army in 1942. Subsequently, in 1990, he was posthumously awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union for his bravery during the arduous and grueling winter of 1941, while attempting to defend the capital Moscow from the German attack. Lavrinenko is remembered as the greatest scoring Allied tank ace, with 52 tanks destroyed. He wasn't just a competent tank commander, he was also a great tactician, methodically planning ambushes and concealing his tank in clever ways. He certainly is a legendary tank ace who deserves more respect and recognition. Had you ever heard of Dmitry Lavrinenko before this video? Are there any other Allied tank aces you would like me to talk about in the future? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, consider dropping a like and subscribing to my channel. Above, you can find other content I've made, so if you're interested, then maybe go watch one of those. Every little bit helps me grow. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.